The forest is taking people in ways that defy all logic. These victims vanished into thin air from places where disappearance was impossible. A runner evaporates from a crowded mountainside. A boy disappears on a short path back to his own campsite. You must watch until the final reveal to understand the terrifying connection between these cases that still haunts investigators today. In the summer of 2012, the city of Seward in Alaska thrummed with anticipation. The annual Mount Marathon race was about to begin, and the streets echoed with the sound of cheers, shoes scuffing pavement, and the restless energy of hundreds of runners preparing themselves to climb one of the most punishing trails in North America. This was no ordinary race. Its distance was short, just 3 miles, but its cruelty lay in its vertical ascent and descent, dragging competitors 1.5 miles almost straight up the mountainside, then throwing them back down toward the town, knees and lungs burning with every step. For over a century, it had claimed bruises, broken bones, and shattered pride, but it had never taken a life, until the year 66-year-old Paul Lamotte stepped forward to run. Paul was not an elite athlete chasing glory. He was a career counselor on a military base in Anchorage, a man whose job was to steady soldiers leaving behind the structure of service and guide them into the uncertain terrain of civilian life. He had built his career on patience and empathy, helping others craft resumes, chase opportunities, and believe that there was a future worth striving for. Beyond the walls of his office, he maintained his own discipline. He loved to run, to keep his body sharp, to prove that age had not eroded his endurance. The Mount Marathon had whispered to him for years. Each July he had thought about it, toyed with the idea only to push it aside. But in 2012, he committed. He trained not to win, but to finish honorably, to be able to tell his family and himself that he had conquered the mountain. On July 4th, the streets were alive with celebration. The sky was streaked with summer light, the air thin with expectation. Paul stood at the starting line. His family pressed along the sidewalks, waving, clapping, cheering his name. When the starter's fire weapon cracked, 500 bodies surged forward, and Paul found himself swept along, his breath steady, his eyes fixed on the ascent ahead. He knew he would be slower than many, but that was no shame. Step by step, he climbed. 2 hours later, when most had already finished, the crowd near the finish line grew restless. Faces turned to the mountain, scanning the descent. Paul was not among them, yet his family did not panic. They knew he would not push himself recklessly. They knew he might be one of the last. Still, unease crept in. At the summit, a timing crew had seen him. He had arrived late but determined, breathing hard yet composed. They told him he was the last competitor on the course and asked if he wanted to continue. He had smiled, nodded, said yes. They descended before him, pausing to look back. He stood upright, steady, preparing to follow. The path was clear, the trail marked, the direction obvious. Then they left him, their faster pace carrying them quickly out of sight. At the bottom, the crew looked back, expecting to see Paul emerge from the mist. Minutes passed. 90 minutes passed. Still no Paul. His family's excitement shifted into dread. Their eyes fixed on the slope, their voices quieter, edged with urgency. By evening, fog rolled over the mountain, a curtain of gray that thickened the air and chilled the skin. Searchers were summoned, state troopers called in. That night, the mountain came alive with beams of light and shouts echoing through the mist. Hundreds of expert searchers combed the course, branching into the unforgiving backside of the mountain where no runner should ever have gone. Dogs sniffed for scent. Men clambered over loose rock. Helicopters hovered when the fog allowed, their thermal cameras scanning for the faint glow of a body. But the mountain gave nothing. For days passed, each one colder and heavier than the last, and not a single shred of Paul's existence was uncovered. Theories rose and fell like the fog itself. Perhaps he had stumbled from the trail, but the course was marked with precision, a century of experience etched into every turn. Perhaps a predator, but there were no signs of a struggle, no cries, no remains. Perhaps exhaustion, confusion. Yet he had been seen strong and coherent at the summit. Rational explanations collapsed beneath the weight of silence. Paul Lamott had simply ceased to be visible in a place crowded with witnesses and watchmen, his absence impossible and undeniable. His family stood at the base of Mount Marathon, staring upward at the indifferent slopes, left with only the unbearable truth that he had run into the mountain and never returned. 8 years earlier, in Utah's Uinta Mountains, the story was quieter but no less cruel. It was August of 2004 when Kevin Bardsley led his 12-year-old son Garrett onto a Boy Scout camping trip near Lake Q-Brant, a remote jewel of water tucked among high ridges. The path to reach it was arduous, winding past 7 smaller lakes, leaving civilization far behind. When the group finally set camp near the lake's western shore, they were at least an hour's hike from the nearest trailhead, the world of towns and roads left in another life. On the morning of August 20th, Kevin and Garrett rose before the others. The campsite was still, tents zipped, fire cold. Father and son slipped from the quiet camp, their rods and reels in hand, their laughter mingling with the morning air. The trail to the lake was short and clear, no more than 150 meters, the trees whispering above them as they walked. At the water's edge, the sun broke across the mountains, painting the surface with gold. Garrett, restless and playful, bounded across stones poking through the shallows. His foot slipped. He splashed down, his shoes and pants soaking through. He laughed, brushing it off with youthful resilience, insisting that the wet clothes meant nothing, that he would fish regardless. But the water's chill crept into his bones, and after a while he frowned, telling his father he would return to camp to change. Kevin, adjusting his reel, nodded. He promised he would be right there, waiting when Garrett returned. Kevin watched him rise, watched him take the short path back through the trees, the sound of voices from the camp drifting down. His son was walking toward those voices, toward warmth, toward safety. But he never arrived. Minutes passed, then 20, then more. Kevin turned, expecting to see Garrett come bounding back with dry clothes. He did not. At last, Kevin reeled in his line, gathered his gear, and walked back. At camp, others were stirring, boys and fathers laughing, preparing breakfast. But Garrett was not among them. His tent was empty, his wet clothes untouched. Kevin's voice rose, first asking, then shouting. No one had seen him. Panic spread like fire. The camp erupted into a frantic search, fathers and scouts racing into the trees, calling Garrett's name. Their voices echoed off the rocks, unanswered. Within hours, the sheriff's department was there, soon joined by the FBI. Hundreds of searchers descended upon the mountains, combing ridges, circling the lake, shouting until their throats were raw. Dogs sniffed the air, helicopters beat the sky, but the boy was nowhere. Only in the late afternoon did a sliver of him appear. A single Nike sock, jammed between boulders half a mile from where he had last been seen. His mother confirmed it was his, removed from a wet foot. That sock was the last physical proof that Garrett had walked those woods. Days stretched into nights. Rescuers scrambled over rocks and into canyons, refusing to abandon hope. But Garrett was gone. Authorities insisted he must have wandered, lost the trail, succumbed to the elements. Yet that explanation twisted against itself. He had known the path, walked it hours earlier. It was straight, short, and familiar. The voices of his fellow scouts carried easily. He was walking toward them, not away. An animal harm might be possible, but the silence of it, the absence of blood or struggle, the lack of a cry, it did not fit. Garrett had left his father's side and stepped into a void, his presence erased, his life preserved only by the fragment of a sock and the endless ache of those who searched. Long before either of these, another woman stepped into a forest and was never seen again. Her name was Rosemary Konst. In 1950, when she was only 21, she had married Charles Bud Konst, the love of her life. Together they had built a family, 6 children, 11 grandchildren, and a rhythm of existence that blended family life with their shared love for the outdoors. They hiked together, breathing the clean air of California trails, their bond deepened by miles and landscapes. But in 1998, a car accident tore it all apart. Rosemary survived, her body broken but able to heal. Bud did not. The grief hollowed her. She spent months clawing her way back through physical rehabilitation, only to return home to the unbearable silence of absence. The man she had built her life with was gone, and she was left untethered. By the year 2000, she was 70. She heard of a retreat, a spiritual journey to Spirit Lake, near Mount Shasta. The group was led by Charlie Red Hawk Tom, elder of the Carrick tribe, who guided seekers to a hidden basin each year to perform ceremonies and dances meant to reach the spirits of the dead. For Rosemary, it was not superstition but a chance to feel closer to Bud, to stand at a place of reverence and whisper his name into the stillness. She joined the group, enduring a 12-mile horseback ride into the wilderness. Spirit Lake lay encircled by steep walls, as if cradled inside a broken volcano. Its only real entrance was on the north, where the group set camp. On August 17th, after their first night of ceremony, the group prepared to travel to another lake. Rosemary chose to stay behind. She wanted silence, to sit with the lake, to hold Bud in her thoughts. Red Hawk left her with his 12-year-old son, Chalet, and the camp cook. Around midday, she decided to walk. She asked Chalet to join her. He declined, and she smiled, accepting it, taking only a bagged lunch. She disappeared into the trees, heading south. When the group returned hours later, Rosemary had not come back. Chalet and the cook, who had sat at the camp's edge near the only exit, swore she had not left. Panic flickered through the group. Searchers were summoned. Within a day, 50 rescuers circled the lake, climbing ridges, scouring the basin. Gree Adams, an experienced head of search and rescue, led them. He had seen many vanishings, many tragedies, but Rosemary's case confounded him. She could not have scaled the southern walls, steep, slick, requiring gear she did not possess. She had not taken the northern trail. Her companions would have seen her. Dogs brought to follow her scent failed instantly, as though there was no trace to follow. Helicopters scoured the area. Volunteers pressed into every ravine. Days passed, and all that was found was a small tuft of her hair, clinging to brush half a mile away. Beyond that, nothing. Her children chose at last to end the search. Gree Adams, hardened by experience, admitted his bewilderment. He said the only time he had seen such erasure was in those who intended to vanish themselves. But Rosemary had not stepped into those woods with despair. She had asked for company, had taken food, had promised to return. Her intent was life, not its opposite. Yet she was gone, her absence total, her presence consumed by the forest. These three names, Paul Lamott, Garrett Bardsley, Rosemary Const, are joined by thousands more across North America, cataloged by investigators like David Paulides in the Chronicles of the Missing 411. Each disappearance whispers the same dread, that there are places where the ordinary laws of the world bend and break, where people are plucked from the thread of time and swallowed whole. The mountains and forests are ancient, indifferent, and in their shadows people vanish not with a scream but with silence, leaving behind fragments. A sock, a tuft of hair, the memory of a man breathing at the summit, and questions that claw at those left behind. The wilderness holds its secrets close. For the families, there is no closure, only the stories of a door left half open, of a story without an ending. They stare at the trails, the mountains, the waters, and ask the questions that echo forever. How can a man vanish from a race watched by hundreds? How can a boy disappear on a path of 150 meters? How can a woman walk beside a sacred lake and leave no trace? And why does the forest remain silent? The names remain, etched in grief and wonder. After hearing the stories of Paul Lamott, Garrett Bardsley, and Rosemary Const, which disappearance do you find the most disturbing? Do you believe these are accidents explained away? Or do you think something far stranger is at work in the wilderness? How do you explain people being erased in plain sight? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more Missing 411 stories.